I remember the days when my life felt like a well-written love story, where every chapter was filled with laughter, trust, and seemingly unbreakable bonds. My wife Claire and I had been together for nearly a decade, and in those years, we had built a life that many envied. We were the couple that friends turned to for advice, the ones everyone assumed had it all figured out. Our evenings were often spent on the couch, sharing stories about our day, our dreams, and our future. I would look at her, and in those moments everything felt right. Claire was the kind of woman who lit up a room with her smile. Her laughter was infectious, and her kindness was evident in the way she treated everyone around her. I loved her fiercely, and I trusted her completely. We had our routines, our rituals: Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Friday nights spent cooking together, and long walks in the park. It was a simple life, but it was ours, and I cherished every moment. Yet, as I reflect on those days, I can see the cracks that I had ignored, the signs that I had brushed off as mere quirks of life. Claire had started to change subtly. She became more distant, often lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzing with notifications that she would hastily dismiss. At first, I attributed it to work stress. She had recently taken on a new project at her job, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something I couldn't quite grasp. I remember one evening in particular, a late dinner that we had planned. She had canceled at the last minute, claiming she was too tired to go out. I brushed it off, telling myself that she needed rest. Little did I know, the tiredness was a facade. It was during one of those evenings that I first heard the name of the man who would change everything: Jordan Blake, a motivational speaker. Claire had mentioned him in passing, saying how inspiring he was, how his words resonated with her. I nodded along, feeling a sense of pride that she was so engaged in her personal growth. I even encouraged her to attend one of his seminars, thinking it would be a good opportunity for her. How naive I was. As the weeks passed, I noticed more changes. Claire started spending more time away from home, often attending events and workshops. I thought it was great that she was pursuing her interests, but now I can see how I was blind to the truth. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she would smile at her phone, it all seemed innocent at the time. I wanted to believe the best in her, to trust her implicitly. Our marriage had always been built on honesty and communication, so I never considered that she could betray me. It was in this blissful ignorance that I continued to love her, to support her, and to build our life together. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have someone like her by my side, never suspecting that the very foundation of our relationship was about to be shattered. Love, as I had known it, was about to take a turn into the unknown, and I was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Now, looking back, I wish I had seen the signs. I wish I had questioned her more, pushed for honesty when I sensed something was off. But I didn't. I was too wrapped up in the comfort of what we had built together. That comfort, it turns out, was a fragile illusion. It was a Friday evening when everything changed. I remember it vividly. The air was thick with anticipation as I arrived home from work, expecting the usual warmth of Claire's smile and the smell of dinner wafting through our cozy kitchen. Instead, there was an unsettling silence that greeted me. My heart sank as I called out her name, but there was no response. I walked through the house, my gut twisting tighter with every step. It felt wrong. Eventually, I made my way to our bedroom, and that's when I saw it: Claire's phone lying on the bedside table, screen lit up with a message that made my blood run cold. It was from Jordan Blake. The message was innocuous enough on the surface, something about "can't wait to see you at the seminar tonight." But something in the pit of my stomach told me there was more to it. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling, and opened the message thread. What I found sent shockwaves through my entire being. There were exchanges that were intimate, filled with inside jokes and flirty emojis, things that should have been reserved for a husband and wife, not a motivational speaker and his client. My mind raced, struggling to process the betrayal that was unfolding before my eyes. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, the air knocked out of me. I had trusted Claire implicitly, and here was the evidence that she had shattered that trust in the most unforgivable way. I dropped the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The reality of her infidelity crashed over me like a tidal wave, and I felt paralyzed. Anger, hurt, disbelief. They all swirled within me, creating a tempest of emotions that I couldn't control. I could hear my own heart beating in my ears as I struggled to catch my breath. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out, but I was frozen, grappling with the enormity of what I had just discovered. When Claire finally returned home, I confronted her. The moment she walked through the door, I could see the surprise in her eyes, quickly masked by a look of guilt. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice betraying her unease. I held up her phone, my hands shaking with adrenaline. "What's wrong, you tell me?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls like a thunderclap. Her face paled as she realized what I had found. "I can explain," she stammered, but I cut her off, unable to hear her excuses. "Explain what? How you've been cheating on me with this motivational speaker." The words tasted bitter in my mouth, each syllable a dagger. I felt a mix of rage and sorrow, a cocktail of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Claire's eyes filled with tears and she reached for me, but I stepped back, the distance between us feeling insurmountable. "Don't," I said, my voice low and steady. "Don't touch me, I can't even look at you right now." I had never seen her like this, so vulnerable yet so culpable. The woman I loved was standing before me, but she felt like a stranger. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Jordan. He just understood me in a way that—" I didn't let her finish. The excuses spilled out like a flood, but I couldn't bear to hear them. How could she say that? She had betrayed our vows, our life together, all for some fleeting connection with a man whose job was to inspire others. It felt like a cruel joke, and I was the punchline. As the reality of her infidelity settled in, I felt something shift within me. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about the destruction of everything we had built together. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't let this go unanswered. I wouldn't allow her to walk away unscathed. I needed to make her understand the pain she had caused me, and I would do it in a way that would resonate far beyond our four walls. I felt a darkness creeping in, an urge for revenge that I had never experienced before. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. I wanted to expose her, to show the world the truth about the woman she had become. I would not let the man who had taken my wife from me go unpunished. I would ensure that Jordan Blake lost his audience, and I would make sure Claire understood the weight of her betrayal. As I stood there, the silence of our home pressing down on me, I realized that I was no longer just a hurt husband. I had become a man on a mission, fueled by heartbreak and anger. The storm was just beginning. Jordan Blake was everything I was not. He was charming, charismatic, and had a way with words that could captivate an audience. I had seen him on social media, a rising star in the world of motivational speaking, with thousands of followers hanging on his every word. He preached about self-improvement, resilience, and finding one's true potential. To the world, he was a beacon of hope, a man who inspired change and empowered others to reach for greatness. But to me, he was nothing more than a homewrecker. I had never met him in person, but I had seen enough of his videos to understand the allure he held for Claire. He was the type of guy who could make you feel like you were the only person in the room, even when surrounded by hundreds. I could only imagine how his magnetic personality had drawn her in, how his words had wrapped around her like a warm embrace, filling the void that had begun to grow between us. As I delved deeper into the rabbit hole of their conversations, I discovered that Claire had been attending his seminars for months. She had been swept away by his passion, his vision for a better life, and somehow she had convinced herself that her infidelity was justified. She spoke of him as if he were a sage, a guiding light in her life. I could only see him as a thief, stealing my wife and our marriage with his smooth talk and empty promises. The more I learned about him, the more my anger simmered. I felt the urge to confront him, to tell him exactly what he had done to my life, but I knew I had to be strategic. Jordan Blake thrived on his public persona. He loved the spotlight. I needed to use that against him. I wanted to expose the truth behind his facade, to show everyone that beneath the polished exterior lay a man who preyed on vulnerable women. I began to formulate a plan. There was a major seminar scheduled for the following month, one that promised to attract a large crowd eager to hear his latest motivational speech. It was the perfect setting for my revenge. I imagined standing in the back of the auditorium, watching him speak, knowing that I would soon bring his world crashing down. The thought gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt since discovering Claire's betrayal. But I had to be careful. I needed to gather evidence to ensure that my accusations would hold weight. I started by following Claire to one of Jordan's smaller workshops, pretending to be a supportive husband who wanted to encourage her growth. The event was held in a local community center, and as I entered, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I had to see him in action to understand the dynamic between them. As I watched Jordan command the room, I felt a surge of rage. He spoke with such conviction, his voice booming with passion as he encouraged his audience to break free from their limitations. Claire was sitting in the front row, completely enthralled, her eyes sparkling with admiration. I felt like a ghost, invisible to the world around me, watching as the man I despised took my wife's breath away. It was painful to witness, and yet it fueled my desire for revenge. I took notes, capturing snippets of his speech, his tactics, and the way he manipulated the crowd. The more I observed, the more I realized that he was not just a motivational speaker, he was a master manipulator. He preyed on the insecurities of others, using their vulnerabilities to elevate himself. I could see how Claire had fallen under his spell, how he had exploited her need for affirmation and connection. After the seminar, I approached Claire, feigning enthusiasm. "What did you think?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "He really knows how to inspire, doesn't he?" She nodded, her eyes still shining with excitement. I could feel my stomach churn as I watched her enthusiasm for a man who had betrayed me. "It's just so refreshing to hear someone who understands what we're going through," she said, her voice filled with admiration. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that he was the reason our marriage was crumbling, but I held my tongue. I needed to bide my time, to wait for the right moment to strike. As the days passed, I gathered more information about Jordan and his upcoming seminar. I reached out to a few contacts I had in the media, hinting at a potential story about the dark side of motivational speaking. I wanted to paint him as a fraud, a charlatan who took advantage of vulnerable individuals. The more I dug, the more I found testimonials from former attendees who felt manipulated and misled, stories of broken promises and shattered dreams. I began to see a clear path forward. My plan was to confront him publicly, to expose the affair in front of an audience that idolized him. It would be a spectacle, a moment that would forever change the narrative around both Claire and Jordan. I could already envision the headlines: "Motivational Speaker's Dark Secret Exposed." But beneath the surface of my anger, there was a part of me that felt hollow. I was not just seeking revenge. I was also mourning the loss of my marriage, the dreams we had built together. As I plotted my next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how satisfying my revenge might be, it wouldn't bring back the love we once had. I steeled myself for what was to come. I had a mission, and I would see it through to the end. I would ensure that Jordan Blake lost his audience, and in doing so, I would reclaim my own dignity. The day of the seminar arrived, and anticipation coursed through my veins like a live wire. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, meticulously crafting my plan to ensure that Jordan Blake's carefully constructed facade would come crashing down. The venue was a large auditorium, packed with eager attendees ready to absorb his words of wisdom, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I arrived early, blending into the crowd of enthusiastic fans and supporters. I wore a simple black polo and jeans, trying to appear inconspicuous, but inside I felt like a ticking time bomb. As I scanned the room, I spotted Claire mingling with the other attendees, her excitement palpable. She seemed so alive, so vibrant, and yet I could feel the anger simmering just below the surface of my calm exterior. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I would expose her betrayal in the most public way possible. The lights dimmed, and the crowd erupted in applause as Jordan took the stage. He was dressed impeccably, his confident demeanor radiating charisma. I watched as he began to speak, his voice smooth and persuasive, captivating the audience as he shared his latest insights on personal growth and overcoming adversity. I couldn't help but feel disgusted. Here was a man who had built his career on the backs of others' struggles, and yet he was revered like a god. As he spoke, I felt the weight of my plan pressing down on me. I had arranged for a small camera crew to capture the events of the day, ensuring that my confrontation would be documented. I wanted to make sure that this moment would be preserved, a testament to the truth behind the lies. As Jordan's speech flowed, I felt a surge of adrenaline, knowing that soon, the audience would witness the reality of who he truly was. It was during a particularly emotional segment of his speech that I decided it was time to act. He was sharing a story about resilience, encouraging the audience to embrace vulnerability and honesty. I stood up, my heart pounding, and shouted, "Jordan, what about honesty in your own life?" The crowd turned to look at me. Confusion etched on their faces. Jordan paused, his confident demeanor faltering for just a moment. "Excuse me," he responded, his voice laced with irritation. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. "You preach about being real, but you're nothing but a fraud. You've been sleeping with my wife." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation, and I could see the shock ripple through the audience. Gasps echoed, and whispers began to spread like wildfire. Claire's face turned pale as she realized what was happening. I watched as her eyes darted between me and Jordan, panic etched across her features. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction at her reaction, knowing that the truth was finally being revealed. Jordan's composure quickly returned, and he attempted to regain control of the situation. "This is completely uncalled for," he said, his voice steady but strained. "I don't know what you're talking about. This is a space for positivity and growth." But the audience was no longer focused on his words. They were captivated by the drama unfolding before them. I could see some attendees pulling out their phones, recording the confrontation, capturing the moment when the illusion of the motivational speaker began to crack. "I have proof," I shouted, raising my phone to show the audience the messages Claire had exchanged with Jordan. "Look at what she's been telling him. Look at how he's manipulated her." I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I shared the screen with the crowd, displaying the intimate messages that had shattered my world. The murmurs grew louder, and I could see some people shaking their heads in disbelief. Claire stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth in horror. I could feel the weight of her shame, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Jordan's facade began to crumble as people started to whisper among themselves, their admiration for him fading. "This isn't how it should be," he stammered, trying to regain control. "I'm here to inspire, not to be dragged into personal drama." But the damage was done. The audience had turned, and the air was thick with tension. I continued to push forward, wanting to make sure everyone understood the depths of his betrayal. "This man has taken my wife and used her trust for his own gain. He's a fraud, and he's not the inspirational figure you think he is." As I stood there, my heart racing, I felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. I was finally taking control of my narrative, exposing the truth that had been hidden behind closed doors. I could see some attendees looking at Jordan with disdain, their faith in him shaken. Claire finally found her voice, stepping forward as tears streamed down her face. "Please stop," she pleaded, desperation lacing her words. "This isn't the way to handle this." But I was beyond reasoning. "You lost your chance for that when you decided to betray our marriage." I shot back, my voice echoing through the auditorium. The tension reached a boiling point as the crowd began to murmur louder, some standing up to leave, others expressing their shock and disbelief. Jordan's carefully constructed world was collapsing around him, and I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. I had exposed the truth, and there was no turning back now. As the chaos ensued, I couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation. I had taken a stand, and while the path ahead was uncertain, I knew I had reclaimed my voice. I had ensured that Jordan Blake would no longer be able to hide behind his motivational platitudes. The audience would remember this day, and so would Claire. In that moment, I realized that revenge wasn't just about hurting those who had wronged me. It was about reclaiming my own power. And as I stood there, surrounded by the fallout of my actions, I couldn't help but wonder what the aftermath would hold for all of us. The chaos that erupted in the auditorium was nothing short of surreal. As the audience buzzed with shock and disbelief, I felt an adrenaline rush mixed with an overwhelming sense of clarity. I had taken my stand, but the moment of triumph was quickly overshadowed by the reality of what I had done. I had exposed Claire's infidelity and Jordan's deceit, but now I had to face the consequences of my actions. As the crowd began to disperse, I caught sight of Claire standing at the edge of the stage, her face a mask of anguish. She looked lost, her once vibrant energy replaced by a pallor that spoke of shock and despair. I could see her heart breaking, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of regret, but it was quickly swallowed by the anger that had driven me to this point. "Why would you do this?" she cried, her voice trembling. "You've humiliated me in front of everyone." "Humiliated you?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You've humiliated me for months. You think I wanted to be here doing this? You put me in this position when you chose to betray our marriage." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stepped closer, her vulnerability palpable. "I know I messed up, but this wasn't the way to handle it. You've destroyed everything." I took a step back, feeling the weight of her words. She was right in some ways. The fallout from this moment would be monumental, not just for her and Jordan, but for me as well. But I couldn't allow myself to feel pity for her. Not now. "You destroyed everything when you decided to sleep with him," I retorted coldly, my heart hardened by the betrayal. As I turned away from her, I felt the eyes of the audience on me, some filled with sympathy, others with judgment. It was a cacophony of emotions, and I didn't know how to process them. I had wanted revenge, but now I was left with the aftermath. The reality of my actions began to sink in, and I knew that the repercussions would extend far beyond this moment. Jordan had retreated backstage, and I could only imagine the chaos he was facing. His carefully curated image was in tatters, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at the thought. He had built a career on inspiring others, but now he would have to confront the truth of who he really was. I hoped he would feel the weight of his actions, that he would be forced to reckon with the damage he had caused. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift. The media caught wind of the incident, and soon headlines were blaring about the scandal that had erupted at Jordan Blake's seminar. Motivational speaker exposed, infidelity and betrayal at the heart of the drama. It was surreal to see my life splashed across news articles and social media feeds, but I felt a strange sense of empowerment in knowing that I had taken control of my narrative. Claire and I found ourselves at a crossroads. The days after the seminar were filled with tense conversations, our once loving home now a battlefield of hurt feelings and broken trust. She wanted to talk about reconciliation, about finding a way forward, but I was still too raw, too angry to even consider it. I had exposed her, and while part of me felt justified, another part felt the weight of the destruction we had both wrought. "Do you think we can fix this?" she asked one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the silence heavy between us. "I don't know," I admitted, the words tasting bitter. "How do you fix something when the foundation has been shattered? I know I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. I want to make it right," she pleaded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Love isn't enough when trust is broken," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "You've given yourself to someone else, and it feels like you've taken a part of me with you." The truth hung in the air like a specter, and we both knew that our relationship would never be the same. I had sought revenge, but it had come at a cost. I had exposed the truth, but in doing so, I had also exposed the cracks in our marriage that might never heal. As the days turned into weeks, the media frenzy surrounding the scandal began to die down, but the emotional fallout lingered. I found myself questioning everything: the love we had, the life we had built, and whether it was possible to move forward from this. I had taken a stand, but now I was left grappling with the consequences of my actions. Was revenge truly the answer, or had I simply traded one pain for another? I began to seek solace in my friends, sharing my story and seeking advice. Some urged me to fight for my marriage, to consider counseling and healing. Others told me to walk away and reclaim my independence. I felt torn between the two, caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions that left me exhausted. And then there was Jordan. His fall from grace was swift and brutal. He had lost his audience, his reputation. Shattered in the wake of the scandal, I followed the news, watching as he attempted to salvage his career, but the damage was done. He had become a cautionary tale, a man who had built his empire on the backs of the vulnerable, only to be exposed for the fraud he truly was. In the end, I realized that revenge had not brought me the closure I had hoped for. I had wanted to hurt him, to make him feel the pain he had caused me, but instead, I had only deepened my own wounds. I had to face the reality that while I had exposed the truth, it had not healed my heart. As I sat alone one evening, contemplating the events of the past few weeks, I understood that moving forward would require more than just revenge. It would require forgiveness, both for Claire and for myself. I needed to find a way to let go of the anger, to reclaim my life without being shackled by the past. I had lost a part of myself in this battle, but I was determined to find my way back. I would not let betrayal define me. I would rise from the ashes of this experience, stronger and wiser than before. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew that I was ready to embark on a journey of healing. The days turned into weeks, and as the dust settled from the chaos of the seminar, I found myself standing at a crossroads in my life. The anger and betrayal that had fueled my actions began to morph into a quieter, deeper introspection. I had exposed Claire's affair, dismantled Jordan Blake's carefully crafted image, and yet I felt an emptiness that no amount of revenge could fill. I was left with the remnants of a marriage that had once been vibrant and loving, now reduced to fragments of pain and distrust. I spent many evenings reflecting on what had happened. I had wanted to reclaim my power, to make a statement about the betrayal that had shattered my world. But in doing so, I had also exposed my own vulnerabilities. I had become a man defined by anger and hurt, and I realized that if I wanted to move forward, I needed to reclaim more than just my narrative. I needed to reclaim myself. I began to seek therapy, a step I had long resisted. I knew I needed to process the whirlwind of emotions that had engulfed me since discovering Claire's infidelity. In those sessions, I learned to untangle the threads of my anger, hurt, and confusion. I began to understand that while revenge had felt satisfying in the moment, it had not provided the healing I truly sought. Instead, I needed to focus on forgiveness. Forgiveness was not about absolving Claire or Jordan of their actions. It was about freeing myself from the chains of resentment that had begun to weigh me down. I realized that holding onto anger only served to keep me tethered to the past, and if I wanted to move forward, I had to let go. It was a difficult process, one that required me to confront the pain head-on, but with each session, I felt a little lighter, a little more in control of my emotions. Claire, too, was grappling with the aftermath of the scandal. She reached out to me, expressing her desire to attend couples therapy, to work through the issues that had led to her infidelity. I was hesitant at first. The wounds were still fresh and the trust was shattered. But as time passed, I began to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who was willing to confront her mistakes and seek redemption. We began attending therapy sessions together, and while it was uncomfortable at times, I could see a flicker of hope. Claire was open and honest about her feelings, her insecurities, and the reasons that had led her to seek validation outside our marriage. It was painful to hear, but it also offered me insight into her struggles and the pressures she had faced. Slowly, we began to rebuild our communication, learning to express our needs and desires without fear of judgment. The road to healing was not linear. There were days filled with laughter and connection, and then there were days when the weight of betrayal would resurface, threatening to pull us back into the darkness. But we persevered, both committed to the work of rebuilding trust. I learned to voice my feelings openly, and Claire learned to acknowledge her flaws and the impact of her choices. As the months passed, I found myself changing. I was no longer the man consumed by anger and revenge. I was evolving into someone who sought understanding and growth. I began to focus on my own passions, rediscovering hobbies I had neglected in the wake of my marriage. I took up running, finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement, and I even started volunteering at a local community center, helping others navigate their own challenges. It was cathartic, and it helped me regain a sense of purpose. Then, one evening, as we sat together on the porch, the sun dipping below the horizon, I felt a shift within me. I turned to Claire, who was gazing out at the fading light, and I knew that while the scars of our past would never fully disappear, we had the opportunity to create something new together. "I think I can forgive you," I said softly, the words tasting bittersweet on my tongue. "But it's going to take time." Claire looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't expect it to be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back," she replied, her voice steady. In that moment, I felt a sense of hope. We were no longer defined by betrayal. We were two people committed to healing, learning, and growing together. It wouldn't be a quick fix, but it was a start. We had both faced the consequences of our actions, and now we had the chance to redefine our relationship. As I looked out at the sunset, I realized that life was not just about revenge or retribution. It was about resilience, understanding, and the capacity to rise from the ashes of our mistakes. I had learned the hard way that love is not a static emotion. It requires effort, communication, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths that lie beneath the surface. In the months that followed, we continued to work on ourselves and our relationship. We set boundaries, established open lines of communication, and learned to appreciate the small moments that had once been taken for granted. I found strength in vulnerability, and Claire began to cultivate the self-worth that had been overshadowed by her choices. As I moved forward, I understood that while the scars of betrayal would always be a part of my story, they would not define me. I had emerged from the storm not just as a man seeking revenge, but as someone who had faced the darkness and chosen to step into the light. I had learned that true strength lies not in the desire to hurt others, but in the ability to forgive, to heal, and to embrace the possibility of a brighter future. And so, as I stood at the threshold of a new chapter in my life, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I had reclaimed my voice, my power, and most importantly, my capacity to love and forgive. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, with Claire by my side and a heart open to healing. This was not the end, but rather a beginning, a chance to write the next chapter of our lives, one filled with hope, understanding, and the promise of a love that had weathered the storm. And with that, I embraced the future, ready to see where the path would lead us next.